these work? Maybe? I'm going to start with water.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning. My name is Dana Donaldson, class of 2005, and proud Vice President of Chatham's Alumni Association Board. Today, I have the pleasure of welcoming back two beloved professors. But before I do, would you please join me in taking a moment to recognize the staff here at Chatham for this weekend and all of the wonderfulness that has happened. Particularly Katie Toma, Dana D. Pasquale, and Thea Kalsovic. None of this would have been possible and has gone above and beyond all expectations. So thank you, thank you, thank you. Okay, so two quick questions. Please raise your hand if you've had one of these gentlemen as a professor before.
Ooh.
Okay?
That's pretty
Now,
Bad. That's wrong.
now raise your hand, please, if you had them on your tutorial board.
Whoa.
Whoa.
Serious.
Uh-huh.
Serious.
Combined,
We're in trouble.
yeah, Dr. Hirschberger and Dr. Lenz have accumulated 74 years at Chatham. Yeah. Yeah, right? Yeah. Between them, they have taught over 5,000 students, undergraduates, graduates, gateway students, continuing education students, and Chatham Abroad students. By their estimate, they have written about 2,500 letters of recommendation for graduate programs, internships, fellowships, and jobs. You may have known them as professors, administrators, advisors, and tutors. Dr. Lenz was on my tutorial board. Demise of the American Movie Palace, if anybody's interested in reading that over in the library. Or you may have remembered them in less official roles, like judging song contests in the fall, or perhaps emceeing air band in the spring, or accumulating pink flamingos in the office. Without further ado, please welcome back, gentlemen, and thank you for being here. Thank you, everybody.
Let's see how. Nice, nice. Okay. So, I can't sit down. You know that, right? I have to walk around. Do I need the mic?
No.
Oh, I do. Okay, I need the mic. All right. So, we were asked to do this because we're both retired. And this is a good thing, good way to fill up your Sunday morning, right? I came in 1980 and retired in 2015. And Dr. Hirschberger,
1912. And I can't remember when I retired.
a long time ago.
A long time ago.
So I realized this morning, this is sort of like being an alum. You cross that divide, you graduate, and now you're retired. You're an emeritus faculty member. And that means that when you come back to the campus, even though I just live around the corner, right? When you come back, things may look a little different. And of course, the big difference now is there are many more men on campus than there were back in those days. It's nice that there are so many people, right? So many people here. And that's a good thing. In addition, you worry what else has changed, right? Something has changed, the trees cut down, there's Eden Hall campus of sustainability, there's East Side, right? There are all these different things, and yet, when I picked up the communique from October 3rd, which I did the other day when Tom and I were in here checking out the facilities to see what worked and what didn't, there's an essay in here, an article by a first-year student called Hannah Fearley, and it's a first-year student reflects on her first weeks at Chatham. I'm going to read you this little clip because it struck me as so appropriate and so useful as an introduction to what we're all doing here, which is coming back, reconnecting, and remembering, thinking about our time here at Chatham as Chatham women. I found my first week of classes to be much less stressful than I had anticipated, thanks to professors who were friendly and considerate and eased us into what classes at the collegiate level are meant to be like. Torturous amounts of reading aside, I've found that balancing my work has been easier than I had expected, given my procrastination track record. Who would that be, right? Additionally, the ability to ask questions and engage in discussion in class has made learning easier and more enjoyable than it has ever been for me. Some things change and some things don't change. Part of what I think makes Chatham and has always made it so special is that connection between faculty and students, the connection that makes so much of our lives as faculty members easy, simple, and engaging. And I hope it also connects in the same way with you. Tom?
Do I need a microphone? Can I use yours? And just to be clear, this is Lenz and I'm Hirschberger. That wasn't clear from the introduction. So you're all here. I don't know how we ended up getting here, although I do know that we will work for food because we were invited out for lunch and I had a grilled cheese sandwich, and the next thing I know, Bill and I agreed to do this. So you can find out, you can know that I'm fairly easy about these things. A couple things just to clarify. Bill and I have written 2,500, an estimate, 2,500 letters of recommendation. That was not one letter written 2,500 times. Those were 2,500 different letters of reference that we made. And that this was already clear, the 74 years is not consecutive. We double counted. We cheated and double counted some of the things. So let me comment a little bit about some of the ground rules. We're going to talk, we have a playlist. We have 10 faculty members that we've picked, selected, or were selected. We have their photographs, and if we hear any laughter or amusement when you see these photographs, that'd be great. We've been laughing for weeks. I mean, seeing the same one over and over again, and we're still laughing. So the ground rules are, we're going to go through the playlist. We have some observations and comments. Some may be true, others maybe not, but no one will know. And then if you have observations or comments that you want to make about those faculty members, we're happy to entertain them and listen to them. And then once we get through that, we have another list of other photographs of faculty members who were Chatham graduates. And there's a long and significant list of those women. And then we'll see how things go. So let's begin by looking at our first faculty member. The word is epic. And there are so many Frank Lackner stories, we could turn this into a whole routine for hours. But I'll just hit on a few high points. When I first came to Chatham, I had picked up somehow, in 1972, it was not 1912, when I picked up a college student's guide to colleges. And Frank Lackner was mentioned in there as a reason to not only take a course from Frank Lackner if you came to Chatham, but to also come to Chatham to take a course with Frank Lackner. The list of things that he did is astonishing. Where should I begin? This is not the picture, but at one point he injured his back. He continued to teach in C-135, which many of you remember, and he came into the room hobbling, went up to the front, climbed on the table, laid flat back on the table, turned his head, and gave an hour-and-a-half lecture. Another time in class, Frank smoked. It was also a requirement if you were a new faculty member at Chatham, you had to smoke. I mean, it was like, that's part of the rules. I mean, it came in, it was part of your contract. And so Frank smoked. And then he decided, I think his daughter harassed him or something, and he decided that he was going to give up smoking. And so he announced to everyone that he was going to quit smoking. And halfway through one of the classes, after about 2 weeks into this, he sort of pulled up his sleeve, said, "These damn patches don't work at all." He had OD'd on patches. he ripped 3 patches off, reached in another pocket, lit up a cigarette, and sort of said, okay, that's it, I'm smoking. And then one other thing to just sort of comment about one of the things that Frank had Christmas parties. I don't know if any of you remember or know anything about his Christmas parties. Around 300 to 400 people would be invited to the party. He had a huge house over on Shady Avenue, and it was a major event. People would try to get invitations, okay? They would say, could you get me an invitation to Frank's party? And I would go to Frank sometimes and say, so-and-so wants an invitation to your party. And he would go, no. I don't like her. She can't come. He would invite his students, some of his students over to decorate. He would have 7 Christmas trees at the party, and 200 to 300 people would show up. And students would come and be able to help with the party, sort of engineering, keeping punch bowls full. They were also required to have a non-disclosure agreement because at various times things did get a little bit out of hand, and they were not allowed to go back to campus and announce they had seen their faculty member dancing on the piano or something like that. The last thing, which is not really sort of funny, but just sort of maybe many of you don't know, is Mysteries of Pittsburgh. Okay? Well, Frank Lackner and his family are all through the Mysteries of Pittsburgh. And if you want reading and want to find out something about Frank, that's a good place to take a look at something. It's good. Okay. So I have, I can go forever, but does anyone else want to have a Frank? We'll come back to you. Bill, do you want the hot mic?
Sure.
Yeah. This is being live streamed, and so can you imagine what I can say, and it will just be out there forever? I'm not going to do that.
So, John Watson Cummins. Wow, that's an early picture. Kathy, his daughter, just said to me, "What's with the tie? Look at that." John was not known for these straight ties. He was known for these beautifully handcrafted ties that his wife, Catherine, made for him. Beautiful bow ties, big, floppy, small, sharp, but gorgeous fabric. So this is very, very early. I don't know exactly what year it is, but wow, super early for John Watson Cummins. 74, before I came. Long before I came. I don't think he put the ties on for me, but why not? I'll think that. John was larger than life, just like Frank Lackner, a huge force on this campus when I arrived. And I guess I would say he was my mentor. He tried to do things to help me along and help me fit in. So that, for instance, on the first or second day I was here, he said to me, "Now, Bill, you know, as a male faculty member, you must always keep your door open when you have a student inside." And I said, "Okay, good." And he said, "It's protocol, it's appropriate, and it's not Victorian." I said, "Okay, not Victorian, but it sure smacks of it, right?" I also asked him for advice on occasion. So I said to him, this is probably a year or so after I had gotten a little less wet behind the ears. I said, "John, it's the beginning of classes, the beginning of the year. I got butterflies in my stomach. When does it end? When do you stop feeling so anxious about the first day of class?" And he looked at me and said, "Never." And I said, "Never?" He said, "Oh no, I feel it every year, the same thing." And I said, "Well, what do you do? How do you cope?" And he said, "I go and throw up in the men's room." And I looked at him and I thought, this is something I would never have anticipated, and I hope never to see. But that was John, right? He always had that sort of odd twist on things. And so you wonder, grading. Tom and I were talking about grading the other day in preparation for this. We were sort of trying to get our memories lubricated about all of our older friends. I can say that, right? Older friends. And so we were talking about grading, and John always said to me, "Bill, you're spending so much time on grading." And I said, well, you know, it's important to write comments on these papers, and then they can improve. And he said, well, you know, at the end of the year, what I do is I take those final essays, and I throw them on the staircase. And the ones at the top, I see some of you have heard this. A's, that's right, A's, B's, C's, and there are always a couple at the bottom. You see where he got it from, right? Now, of course, the other side of this is that John also didn't return those final papers, right? This was one of his tricks. I could never do this, but he was a master at this. And he said, well, you see, I know they really don't care about the final paper. They just want to get it in and get the grade. But if a student asks to see her paper, then I will get it out and I will put meticulous comments on it. Now, we all know that he didn't really grade by throwing them on the stairs. He was an incredible grader. He really understood student psyche, right? He could see where a student did well and where she went wrong. But he didn't think he would spend all that time writing the comments on every paper when maybe 2 out of 40, right, would actually ask for that paper back. Interesting. John Cummins stories. Who has a good John Cummins story? Absolutely. First of all, you have to identify yourself.
I am Ann Rush Duffield. I graduated in 1969.
Perfect.
I had John Cummins for class, but most notably, I had him as one of the panel for my tutorial. My tutorial advisor was Don Adam, and I did a tutorial on Tristram Shandy and covered the archetypal side of Tristram Shandy. I can't tell you the exact title. But I had spent, like everybody does, months on this tutorial. I had even taken the equivalent of no-dose in that day, which was not no-dose, to keep doing the paper. And I had spent hours and hours at Don Adams' house, and in fact, about 4 or 5 of us slept there quite regularly. I went in for this panel review of my tutorial, and John Cummins said, like this, down his nose, I don't understand a word of this tutorial. And that was the opening review. Could you please explain it to me, Miss Rush? And Don Adam very quickly went, let me try to explain it. But that was John Cummins. He minced no words in our day and age, at any rate. Thank you.
Excellent. Anyone else want to jump in on this? Way in the back.
One sec, Chris. I'm gonna get my steps in.
This is like Jerry Springer, right?
Swearing.
No.
So Dr. Cummins was, I never had him as a teacher. However, he got to know me just outside of class, and he knew I loved photography. So he handed me an old book that he had that was full of photographs that were his, because he knew I also loved history. And so together, he handed me a book of historical photos that I keep to this day. I am Chris Zollner of the class of '94. But he gave it to me as a graduation gift when I was a junior. And that was shortly before I went on the month abroad. And he died while I was in London.
Thank you. All right.
Okay.
We can come back. Who's next?
Pat Bladen. I tried to come up with words that were descriptive, and the one Pat Bladen word that kept coming up in my head, which I'm talking to myself, was grit. Pat was just gritty, full of character, full of strength, and she lived her every day that way. So I have a couple stories to talk about Pat. She taught archery, and it was up on the field, and for some reason one of the neighbors was not fond of what was going on in the field, and apparently an arrow periodically would go into the neighbor's yard, and there was like a debate about how to get the arrow back, and so somehow the students organized and decided to shoot all of their arrows into the yard. I didn't actually see it, but it was described to me as a medieval battle scene with 50 or 60 arrows all in the yard at once. And Pat took on the job of going over and negotiating the removal of the arrows with some fake promise that they would never shoot another arrow ever again in the yard. And so she negotiated that little piece of work. And the students were always sort of playing those kinds of games. Another more serious note is when Pat was ill, and this gets back to grit. She was teaching a fencing class, and she would not give up the fencing class, and she was teaching it on a roll-around chair in the dance studio up there. And that was sort of an example of how much grit that Pat Bladen had. And that's all I have to say about Pat, but I'm sure some of you might have something to say. Here, I got it.
Oh, thanks, Tom.
Thank you.
Hi, everybody. Chris Edsel Bell from class of 1984. So I came here as a freshman and was quickly assigned to work for Pat Bladen as my work-study assignment up in the gym. And that wasn't very glamorous, and I wasn't really thrilled about that, especially when I had to wash the icky field hockey uniforms that I just hated touching, those ugly things. So I quickly became her secretary, and I had mornings free, and I went up and worked for her in the mornings, and she relied on me very heavily, and it was great training for my future. But I really regret not ever taking any classes from Pat, especially swimming, because to this day I don't know how to swim, and I know that Pat would have made me swim. And here's why I know. One day I was sharing with her that I was struggling with learning how to drive a stick shift car. And I was practicing this at home when I would go home in the summers. And so I was telling her about, I'm not doing this, I'm just failing at it. So one day she said to me, hey, I got to go down to Squirrel Hill. I got to get some office supplies, and I'd like you to come with me. I said, sure. So we're walking out. She has a brand new Volkswagen. And we're walking out, and she says, Kristen, catch. And she tosses me her keys. And I said, no, Pat, that's your brand new car. I don't know how to drive a stick shift. And she said, get in, you're driving it. And I thought, oh my God, we're gonna go down Squirrel Hill. We're gonna be on hills. This is the nemesis of a stick shift, right? So I was terrified, but she made me do it, and I did it, and I do regret not taking swimming because I would be a swimmer today had I taken her class, because I had just seen her like, Kristen, jump in.
Janet Walker, class of 67. Thank you. I had the great pleasure of assisting Pat with the fencing class. I took it when I was a student here, and then when I came back to teach, I'd also go up and help her with the fencing class. And then my great pleasure and my great memory is that after class, we would fence. And she would come straight at me. Do you remember how she laughed? That was wonderful. She'd come straight at me and make me defend myself. But after she died, I had her foil and her mask. And they're both up in the athletic center in the glass cases there. So we have Pat still fencing up there.
Okay, I'm Pam Bradley, class of 1970, and I would have to say I didn't realize it at the time, but when I came to Chatham, I came from a huge public high school where the boys did everything and the girls were the secretaries, and I was athletic and I was smart. So when I got to Chatham, the smart was good, everybody was smart here. But I finally realized that it was okay to be athletic, because Pat Bladen, she was my role model. I thought, this is a tough lady. She's funny, she's fun. I took water safety instructor from her, but some of you may know I was a serious swimmer. I can teach you to swim if you like to know. And then when I graduated, I was living over in Squirrel Hill and over somebody's garage because I was working in Pittsburgh. And she gave me a dining room table for my apartment. And I gave it back when I moved. But she just said, "Do you need anything?" I said, "Well, I don't have a table." She said, "Oh, I've got a table." And she brought it over. So, wonderful woman and a real role model for me in an unusual way.
Thank you. Carol Bates, 74. I spent 2 years, my first 2 years here, and took gym with Pat Bladen the whole time. And we took badminton and tennis, and then we took WSI, and we went skiing at Seven Springs. And I mean, she was, and played field hockey both years, you know, and we beat everybody. We beat Oberlin and Indiana, University of Pennsylvania, and all these, every place. But we just had such great times, and it's just, I didn't meet any of my classmates that I don't remember who was in my classes, but she was really indomitable. And she introduced me to the, at that time there was, we played badminton in my family growing up the whole time, in the blizzards and everything else, you know. And so there was a community badminton team here that used to play at the gym, like from the people in the community, but they were really good, you know. Here's the net, and they would hit one just right over the net. It's like professional badminton. And so all the students were invited to play, and I went every Monday night to play with them, but no other students came, but they were really tough. They were amazing. Are they still around? Do you know? There has to be something, because it was I don't know, I think there were about like 30 or 40 people from the community that came to play badminton here. It was really great. There were a bunch of nets set up, but she was amazing.
Great, thank you.
Ellen Terry Kaplan Goldstein, class of 1978. Tom Hirschberger was my tutor. We'll talk about that later.
No. No, we're not. No.
Yeah, we
No.
will later. We will later.
No.
But about Pat, I was on the tennis team, the volleyball team, the field hockey team, and I don't know if any of you remember her teaching skiing on roller skis down where everyone sled rides.
Yeah.
It was crazy what we did back then. I mean, crazy.
Right.
That's before seat belts in cars, too, don't forget. Mary Costalis. It's not often that you actually have the person up there in the audience, right? But what can I say about Mary? She is, in many ways, the embodiment of everything good and true and sincere about Chatham women. I mean that. I've known her my whole career at Chatham, and she is a tremendous role model for everyone. She has done the more traditional things, like be a founder of the Rachel Carson Institute here at Chatham. She's also been a founding member of Squirrel Fest, that some of us may remember. And we're trying to forget that. No, that was a good festival. That was fun, too. She has done all sorts of things for Chatham and for her students. From my point of view, one of my favorite things about Mary was back in the 80s, those of you remember the old core curriculum in the 1980s. The course that we did first was called C&C, Concepts and Composition. And the beauty of that course was I didn't teach it by myself. Chatham faculty from all the different divisions volunteered to be weekly speakers and teachers in that course. And Mary Costalis offered from the sciences to do a weekly lecture and came in and did one of the most interesting, challenging assignments that I think I've heard. And now, Mary, this is my version of it. You can then tell me later what the real version was. But in my memory, the version was she presented a series of problems, real-world problems, like why is there summer in the northern hemisphere at this time of year and winter in the southern hemisphere, right? And things like how far away is the moon from Earth? How would you determine that? And then she asked people to come up with, intuitively, their answers. And of course, what happened is people would guess, and they would come up with these wonderful seat-of-the-pants analyses, which were totally wrong, right? And part of the point to this assignment was you can't just eyeball things. You need to have a scientific method. You need to have evidence. You need to have ways of measuring, and you need to be thoughtful and analytical. And so the students then had to write up each of these problems in a more scientific way and come to the determination of these problems through not guesswork or intuition, but through science. Is that fair? All right, go science, that's right. I think that's wonderful. And it was interesting to see the students who were all expecting, I don't know, we're all going to read Charles Lamb or something, right? To get this kind of assignment and to really wrestle with it, especially those who were English majors or psych majors or something else, right? Here they had to really grapple with it on a week-by-week basis, and that was a lot of fun. And I really liked having colleagues from other departments teaching with the writing faculty as well. Mary Costala's stories. I know she's here, but it's okay if you want to tell a story. I'm giving you permission. No? Please.
I'm Stephanie Fitzsimmons-Barkand. Dr. Casals was a staple for me at Chatham at a lot of times where faculty was changing and different things, and we'd kind of always run into the halls with one another, and she'd be like, "Nope, I'm still here." Like, "Nope." She's like, she had essentially retired several times in the time that I had been at Chatham, but she kept coming back for us, and that's truly what I mean. She kept coming back for us. And I think that's something that's just unbelievably amazing because she has done so many amazing things in her lifetime, and even some of the photos that just seeing in her office from her wading in various outfits into polluted waters and just different things and the stories that she would share. But it was always wonderful because even as I've come back to Chatham, she's there at Candlelight. She's there at all of the events. She's here today. And I just wanted to say thank you for always coming back for us.
You're here. Why don't we move on? Okay. Sorry, Dan.
Oh, that's you're OJ.
That's me. Okay. We try to divvy these up, right? You can jump in anytime you want.
Okay.
All right. So, Ali Giardini, Spanish department, Mr. Snickers bar, right? This is a man who was probably the most optimistic, effusive, happy on campus. I like to think I'm fairly upbeat. No, I'm like a B-, right? OJ was always A+ on all the time, giving out Snickers bars, running up and down the halls, greeting people, interacting with people, enjoying everything about his life. I ended up, because as some of you know, I started going to Spanish-speaking countries with Chatham Abroad. I took a class with him in introductory Spanish. And the first day of class, and he may have done this in every introductory Spanish class, and you may recognize this, he sat us all down and he said, "Now, I'm going to teach you the most useful phrase in Spanish. You can use this," I know, yeah, hold it. I'm going to do it, and then we can all do it together. You can use this in any occasion. It's always appropriate, and you can never go wrong. Should we say it together slowly? El burro sabe más que tú. The burro knows more than you do. This is appropriate for any occasion, anytime you're stumped. El burro sabe más que tú. And I'll tell you the truth, I've used it. It doesn't always have the reaction I hope for, but I have used it. And OJ was certainly someone who stuck in my memory and taught me something about Spanish, not just el burro sabe más que yo, but a lot about the culture, different cultures, and the way to behave in other cultures. That's something I think that OJ was very good at. OJ stories. Do you have an OJ story, Julie? Remember, we're just giving this to you for a moment.
I know. No, but honestly, Julie Arnheim, class of 93, and Spain and Portugal with OJ. Donde es el baño? That was the one that he taught us, because getting through Spain and Portugal without that question was going to be difficult.
Tell another story.
No, that's okay.
All right. Anybody else have an OJ story that they would like? No? Yes? Don't be afraid. He will haunt you if you don't tell a story.
Here, Janet.
Thank you. Janet.
Well, he was a wonderful department chairman, as you might imagine. I just always remember when his phone rang, he would say, "My broker," and run for it. He also had his door shut, perhaps more often than he should have, but you knocked, he'd say, "Go away." And he always had a briefcase for each class. So when he arrived in the morning, he was loaded like a burro, you know, carrying all these bags. No, he was great. I miss him.
Thank you, Janet.
Oh, that's you too. How did that happen?
Who knew?
Who knew?
Prajna Parashar. So I did not know, because of course I'm retired, that Prajna just celebrated her 25th anniversary at Chatham. I still think of her as one of the new faculty, right? I still do. I'm sure you do too, right? She is the queen of post-colonial theory, queen of film, so many different queen titles we could associate with Prajna. But yes? Hugs. Queen of hugs, absolutely. So student-centered, so willing to do anything for the students. You know, this is a theme, right? Every single person we've talked about would do anything for their students, anything at all, not just write 2,500 letters individually, you know, keyed to which program and which internship, but also, you know, working on tutorials, working on papers, doing whatever had to be done. Prajna is always there, right? Always there for her students. She also, I'm not sure she just floats along in campus, right? I'm not sure her feet actually touch the ground. It's very interesting the way that works. I've never quite figured out how she does that, but it's true. It's absolutely true. Prajna stories. Who has, oh, one right there.
So I had Prajna for several classes, intro to film, things of that nature. And it was the end of the semester, and it was you had to write a paper on something that intrigued you with what it is that you read that semester in her class. And I went into Prajna's office, and I said, "I'm going to write about the rule of thirds." She looked at me, and she goes, "What's the rule of thirds?" And I gave her my answer, and she got up and she gave me a hug. I'm like, well, that's different, okay. She goes, "That is absolutely incorrect as to what the rule of thirds is." I was like, oh, she goes, "I'm going to tell you something, you need to pick a new topic." And I was like, all right, cool, I'll pick a new topic. But the way, and it was never, she was talking down to you. It was always very black, white, that's right, this is wrong. Move it on, keep it moving, move along. And I really appreciated that out of her. So she was fabulous and continues to be fabulous.
I will tell you a quick Prajna story before we have the president give us a story. I was on LinkedIn the other day, right? Why, I don't know. I know. Yeah, looking for a job, that's right. No, I'm not. No, I'm not. Travel is good. Okay, so I got this note from LinkedIn, and it's from somebody named Liz Rizza, whom you may or may not know, some head turning. You know who this is, former Chatham student. And she is out in California. She is working with Morgan Stanley, and she thought since I was a Chatham connection, I might be interested in her financial help. Right, nearing retirement. And I thought, wow, that's crazy. So I said, nope, I'm retired. Sorry, really, good luck to you. And she said, make sure you say hi to Prajna for me because she was so much an influence on making me the woman I am today. And I thought, here, right out of the blue, out of the bizarreness of LinkedIn, comes this wonderful testimonial that I can share with you. That's Prajna, right? There you go.
So my very first opening convocation at Chatham back in 16, I was slightly nervous because about an hour after that, and we all headed over to the AFC, we had what was known as a microburst. And so this tornado-like thing came through and for the first 2 days of classes completely took out power to the campus. So not an auspicious way to start, right, your career at Chatham. And so I was walking, yeah, totally, right? And so I was walking around campus and trying to, understand what we were going to do about classes with power down and how everybody was coping and, what were you doing with your students? And I ran into Prajna and she said, Dr. Feingold, don't worry, we have it under control. And I said, so what are you doing teaching film with no power? She said, well, we just sat in the dark, and I explained to the students that the dark is a crucial element of understanding film.
Classic. Was there another hand? There's another hand behind you.
I'm Alex Moffat, class of 2012. So I had one class with Prajna, and my background is math and engineering. I actually spent majority of my time at Carnegie Mellon. And I had this one class with her. I really struggled with writing in general. That's just so not my thing. That's why I did math. And she was so direct in the questions that I was asking her and the support that I needed, but she was willing to give it to me. And she sat down with me a couple times to help me answer those questions. And then last night, I ran into her, and she doesn't remember me, but at the same time, she was so willing to entertain that blip of a conversation, that blip of her life that was so significant to mine. And I think that's the beautiful part of Chatham, is that blip moment that you think you're having with someone in this environment is life-changing. So, thank you.
Next on.
Bill was trying to hog everything. So I'm going to talk a little bit about Chris Michelmore. And if you remember, I used sort of an adjective to describe people. This is a test. What was the adjective that I used for Frank Lackner? Perfect. Oh, good. What was the other adjective that I used for Pat Bladen? Perfect. Here's one for Chris. Gritty. No, that's not it. Crispy. What do you think? So Chris had, her lectures were clear, she was concise, she was on topic, her lectures were a thing of beauty that went from systematic, clear, well done. And the best sort of example of that is she gave a talk last year at the reunion weekend, and it was on the Middle East, and her specialty was the Middle East, and so she gave this talk, and it was with PowerPoints, and it was very well done, it was great. And a student came in late. She stopped and said, "Oh, I'm glad you were able to come," or made some other crispy comment. And like the student would I'm going to get a bad grade for coming late or anything else. And so she really did sort of have sometimes an appearance of being sort of tough and crisp, but she also had a softer side. And to give you an example of the softer side, she was Arabic and was prolific in Arabic and had spent time in the Middle East. And a student came in, and the student had just gotten a tattoo in Arabic.
Never a good sign.
Yeah. At, I don't know, in Shadyside or someplace. And the student said, look at my tattoo. It says, I can't remember what it was supposed to say, peace be with you, or something like that. And she said, well, does it say peace be with you, or whatever the term was? And Chris acknowledged that that's what it had said. And then later she reported that there had been a typo, and it really said cabbage. But the best part about Chris is her softer side. She didn't then announce to the student, you just got ripped off, it says cabbage, go get it redone. She just sort of said, oh, if that's what you think it is, no one else will know, and we're fine with it.
Now, if you're sitting there with a tattoo in Arabic,
So anyway, I should have
you don't need
checked
to
this out.
self-identify.
Phew, and we passed.
That would be hilarious.
I actually scanned the audience to just double check. Does anyone have a Chris comment? Here. We'll come back.
Well, hi, everybody. My name is Megan Clohessy. I'm a 2014 graduate, so newbie 5 years. I had the pleasure of having several classes with Dr. Mitchamore, and she definitely kicked my butt intellectually, if not literally in some cases. The story that I have was actually in my junior year, which was her last semester with retirement. I was sitting in Dr. Rosbach's European Identity course, and Dr. Mitchamore accidentally stumbles into the room, and she is, blustering like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. And she is slowly closing the door, and my professor, who is known for his snarkier comments, went and said, oh, I guess retirement's got the better of you. The door freezes. She busts back in, looks him dead in the eye, and says, at least I can keep my students awake. And then closes the door. I have never been more proud of her since that day.
Excellent.
Hi. Angela Matroza, class of 96. Dr. Mitchamore and I have a great relationship to this day. She was my advisor, my tutor, chair of my tutorial board, and the biggest pain for the 4 years I was here. I learned very quickly in my freshman year tape record her classes because handwriting notes was a nightmare. But you spoke of her soft side. When I was a senior, my mother had a massive stroke. My father had passed, my mom was hospitalized, and I didn't know if I was going to finish school. And I didn't know what was going to happen after school. I was on my own, I had no support system. And I went to her, and I was just about halfway through my tutorial in the first semester, because I'd started the summer prior. And I said to her, I don't know if I'm going to finish. And she said, you're going to finish. And I told her the situation with my life, and I've never told this story publicly. My mom was in a coma from a stroke. I barely had a penny to my name. And I went to her and said, I can't finish. I can't pay for my last semester. I'm not going to be able to walk anyway. And she said, we'll figure it out. So she wrote a letter on my behalf to the grand poobahs who let you walk. I don't even know who that is. Maybe it was the president, I don't know. And she said, this girl's doing a tutorial, she's working hard, blah, blah, blah. And she said, you're gonna walk, it'll be fine. So I finished the tutorial, and to everyone's amazement, I was the first person in my class to get a button, because if you knew me in college, not overly studious. So, but I finished my tutorial, I got a B+, mad about it. It was an A- tutorial, whole nother story. I'm still bitter. But anyhow, come graduation, it was an A- tutorial. It was. So come graduation, I walk. It's like a week before graduation. I'm super excited. I'm in her office, and I'm freaking out because my mom is still hospitalized. My mom was being moved to nursing care, and I had no home to go home to. And I had about $200 in the bank. I had a work-study check coming, and I was like, oh my God, I have to go into the world by myself. She sat me down and she says, what do you need? This is about Chatham professors. We've heard a lot of crazy stories about how, people have changed their lives. I would not have graduated and I would not have gotten a foot up in life. She sat me down, said, what do you need? I said, I found an apartment, I can't afford it, and I gotta buy food, I gotta do this, I gotta find a job. She wrote me a check for $2,500. She gave me first and last month's rent. She said, get your apartment, stock your fridge, and get your damn resume together because you're going to pay this money back. And I said to her, my husband thinks I'm insane. He's like, you'll never see this money back. You're an idiot. Don't give it to her. But she's like, I believe in this girl. She's going to do it. She's smart. She's hardworking. She'll do it. She gave me the money. I was floored. I was mortified. I didn't want to take it, but I took it. It was the first time in my life I ever actually took a gift. And I got the apartment on Negley Avenue. I stocked it full of groceries from Giant Eagle or whatever, and then I got my resumes together. I got a waitressing job, and I finally got my first job. It took me 5 years. When I came back from my 5-year reunion, she was still here. I said, I want to take you to lunch. I took her to Harris's Grill out on Forbes, that used to be there, and I slid the very last payment of that $2,500 I owed her with interest. And to this day, we're still friends. She was at my wedding. She was at my divorce party. And so to this day, I have the utmost respect for her. Without her, I don't know how I would have catapulted from college student to like real life adult. She was amazing.
Jerry Kaplan. Words, okay? Big, giant, huge. When you saw Jerry Kaplan, he would just physically or just mystically grasp you. I mean, he just was engaging and huge and big. There are so many stories again about Jerry, but all of you know that his work is around the campus, and you need to be able to stop and look at it. It's a wonderful legacy that he's given to the college, university. Sorry, my bad. There are lots of stories I can tell you about Jerry Kaplan. He was prolific. He produced incredible amounts of...
Someone's tutorial board.
Excuse me. Pardon me. Anyone want to check on that? I mean, it's okay. We're good. Okay, we're going. Okay. I mean, like screaming. Okay. Anyhow.
Class of 2030.
So Jerry would make incredible amounts of art all the time. He was continually making art. And then once a year, he would have a house sale. And only certain people were invited to it. And you would go to his studio, and he would say, I have these 5,000 pots I made, and you can buy them. And if you don't buy them, I'm breaking them all. And that's what he would do. And so he would invite us in for a house sale. He would also, and this is, the art studio used to be in the Benedum Carriage House, and then it was moved down to Woodland Hall. And he built a kiln that was outside on the driveway beside Woodland. And the kiln, he built it himself and ran gas lines, and it would fire up to 2,000 degrees while he would be doing it, and would be bright and fiery, and I think only in violation of 34 OSHA standards, 28 fire standards. But then he even got better, and he became interested in raku. Does anyone remember raku? Yeah. Well, the way in which raku works is that you fire up the illegal kiln beside Woodland, beside where many students are living, and you fire up the kiln to 2,000 degrees. You fire the pot or whatever you have in there, and then without proper gear or anything else, you get tongs, and you go into the 2,000 degree kiln, take it out, not burning yourself, trying not to drop it, take it over to a garbage can filled with straw, and drop it in, which then produces about a 20-foot flame up on the side. And people are looking out their window, and there's fire and smoke coming in. I didn't do my paper. Why? Well, there was fire and smoke blowing in my window. So Jerry was just a sort of bigger-than-life character on campus. If you went near him in the studio, you ended up making a pot. I mean, he just would sort of say, "Come on over, get some dust on you. Here we go," and you would he just was engaging in all those ways. Does anyone have a Jerry story? Oh, here's the raku story. Is this a raku story?
It's not necessarily raku. So I enjoyed to do ceramics for fun, hobby, right? So I think it was my sophomore year. I took an art class from Jerry in ceramics, and he messed up my GPA. He gave me a C. Which I was very unhappy because I got A's. And I said, Jerry, what are you doing to me? I get A's, and you give me a C? You're messing up my whole GPA. And he said, you do not, in art, get an A until you are a senior. You have to progress in your art. It's not possible for you to get an A or even a B. So on one of our little journeys, we went to some museum or some little art studio or something, and that's where I saw the raku, and I got very interested in it as well. So I signed up during interim to do my own independent study working with him, and I got a B+. And I was not yet a senior, so I felt vindicated. It's the whole reason why I did that independent study. I was a psych and business major. I also remember his wonderful Christmas parties where he invited us to his home with the long aluminum tables that I think were in his kitchen, but we made gigantic gingerbread cookies, and that was a wonderful thing to do during the holidays with Jerry.
Nice.
Anyone else? Great.
Erica King. Who remembers Erica King? Okay. When I first came to Chatham, Erica had, I guess I'd call it a reputation, but that probably sounds wrong, right? She was known to me, or was introduced to me, pointed out to me, the woman who does modeling. And I looked at her and I thought, yeah, she could do modeling. I found out later that what it really meant was, A, she bought most of her clothes at Ann Taylor, number one. Number two, she had appeared in Pittsburgh Magazine series of advertisements for Ann Taylor, wearing the clothes that, she got. And clearly she wore them well. We haven't actually talked about clothing except for John Cummins' tie. You think about how people dress at Chatham, right? Different. One of the great things about Chatham is you don't have to dress in a particular way. You can fulfill whatever weird desires you have. Whether you want, I remember Arthur Smith in the history department who only wore like black turtlenecks. And I asked him one day why he wore this outfit all the time. He says, when I got tenure, I decided I was done with ties. Okay. So Erica always was perfectly dressed. I think it was Chris Mitchellmore also, right? Always impeccably dressed. And Erica had this haircut, which as you can see dates from 1972. She told me that. We got to be friends. And she said, William, she never called me Bill, William, I discovered I looked good in this haircut in 1972. It suits me, and I'm never going to change it. And I said, okay. She said, they're sort of like my lecture notes. They're perfect. And if you've had a class with Erica, Dr. King, with Dr. King, you know that she had a notebook, and she opened them up, and she lectured from those notes, and they were perfect. She also, for all that sort of veneer, she too, like Chris Mitchellmore, had a very warm side, a very giving side, and was incredibly good as a tutor. I don't know if anybody had her as a tutor. Excellent tutor. I was on a number of boards that she was the tutor for, and she did a lot of great work with her students. Erica King stories. So sad. When did she teach? Oh, she taught political science. I'm sorry. She was the chair of political science for years and years and years. She was the division chair. She became dean, associate dean, and then she went on to Grand Valley State in Michigan to head their political science department and literally vanished off the face of the earth, right? None of us have heard from her since. Interesting. Okay.
Peggy Stubbs. So this is a test, and you'll get breakfast if you pass. What was the adjective that I used for the first person, and who was the first person I talked to? Okay, and what was the adjective? Okay, great. Who was the second person I talked about? Great. What was the word I used there? Okay, next. You're doing well. I'm really proud. And some of you I know have hangovers. So who was the next one?
Uh-oh.
Uh-oh. Chris. Crispy, right? Who was next? Huge. Stubbs. Menstruation. That's not an adjective, I don't think, but Peggy's commitment, research commitment and professional commitment was doing research on and studying menstruation and teaching about it. She was president of the Menstrual Research Society that it sort of exists, and she had the campus, had the society meeting on campus at one point. And at one meeting that she arranged in New York City for the association that was meeting, she arranged for Gloria Steinem to be the keynote speaker. She was looking around for a gift to give to Gloria Steinem, and it was about menstruation. And so she came up with this idea of getting a tampon bronzed. So I don't know the exact sequence of how these things all worked, but she had to go, you know, the bronzer people that bronze baby shoes? Well, she showed up to the guy with a tampon and said, "Can you bronze it?" And I don't know what that conversation was, how it played out, but she ended up with a bronzed tampon that was given to Gloria Steinem as she gave the keynote address at her conference. I would have liked to have videotaped the whole thing. It could have been a giant Saturday Night Live routine. It could have been just fabulous. Peggy was very committed to students, and they weren't her students, they were students. And she didn't like to think of them as her students. And so she was engaging and kept students involved in all kinds of activities and research activities, and had them presenting papers and doing all kinds of things. She also taught a sexuality class, and I don't really know anything about it. But I think people reported that they liked the class very much. So does anyone have an observation?
They're all our favorites, aren't they?
Yeah. My name is Christine Frosch. I am from class of 2009. I think I took almost every single class Dr. Stubbs taught. Human sexuality was one of them. It was actually a doctorate class when I took it, and I begged and I pleaded to be in that class, and I was the only undergrad in the whole class. She was on my tutorial board, and she honestly, she's incredible. She's incredible. She actually, I work in Orlando now, and I got an internship at SeaWorld. I was really late to her class one day because I got a phone call saying, you got the internship, and I walked in, and I was never late. I tried not to be anyway. And I was like, I'm really sorry. I had a pretty important phone call, and she was like, what was it? I was like, I got an internship, the one I told you about, the one you wrote a recommendation letter for, and for the next day, I came in with streamers, and on the board it was like, Christine Frosch, future dolphin trainer. Yeah, she was one of the best. So, yeah, thanks for letting me share.
Ooh.
Good morning, Vanessa Thompson, class of 2012. Dr. Stubbs did a really good job at opening my mind to everything. One, I took her death and dying class, and she always brought her pet that was dead in a box. So that was interesting because then I was like, I can keep my cat forever as long as I put it in a box. So that was good. And then secondly, I can't remember the entire title, but for my tutorial, I did it on religious women's views on menstruation. And so I don't know if you guys did tutorial hats in your day, but when I did my tutorial hat, similar to the bronze tampon, I mixed up ketchup and water, dipped a tampon in it, and stuck it on my hat. My friends thought it was, yeah, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. That's what I'm saying. That's my sister. I stuck that on a hat. Some of my friends thought it was disgusting, but it made me feel comfortable to think outside of the box. So thank you.
Thank you.
Kika Shipman, class of 2010. I could talk about Dr. Stubbs for days. The paper I wrote with her and Dr. Wister on mentioning menstruation and stereotype
What'd I
threat.
tell you?
The chair she gave me from her office because, well, she didn't need it and didn't want it anymore, and I always sat in the darn chair when I was in her office in the first place, so she just gave it to me. But I'm not going to talk about that. What I'm going to talk about is the fact that one thing that she did that essentially paved the way for the current job that I do now in clinical research, working on a pharmaceutical company, was just getting involved in research in the first place. So at the time, and I'm sure they're probably still friends, she was friends with the head of adolescent medicine at the old Children's Hospital. I want to say her name was Pamela Murray. I don't know why that's sticking in my mind, but I'm pretty sure that was her name. And I had a paid internship through Chatham, which was not a thing, and I was doing a smoking cessation study down at the old Children's Hospital with Pamela Murray and her team of folks, and from then on went to continue to do research and continue to work at Children's and Shadyside, and now I work for ICON, which is a company based out of Dublin, Ireland, but still doing clinical research. So thanks to Dr. Stubbs for starting me on that journey. Good.
One more? Yeah.
Thank you. My name is Adele Schwadron-Canal. I graduated in 1974, and unfortunately I never had the opportunity to take classes with Dr. Stubbs, but I think I probably would have enjoyed them. But this is just a little aside to Dr. Hirschberger.
See, no, wait.
This is breaking the
that's why I'm
rules.
here. That's why I bought the grilled cheese sandwich to control the house. No.
Ellen, what do you think? I graduated in 78, I'm sorry. I'm not that old yet. I'm just so excited. So many of us who were biology majors, and I was a biology and psych major, and many of us in either of those departments did research in our tutorials that had to do with menstruation also. And at the time, Dr. Hirschberger was our advisor, tutorial board, instructor, whatever role he played, he did them all. So I was always of the belief that the research we did on menstruation helped Dr. Hirschberger get his PhD. That we were doing your research is what someone told us. But we began a lot of that back in the 70s.
Yeah, we did. You're right.
That's what they, thank you.
Anissa Wardy. Oh, she's here. How delightful. So, if Prajna is the queen of post-colonial theory, I think Anissa is the queen of cultural studies. That's what I would say. And she has really, how many years have you been here now? Do the math for me. It's a lot. 24. Is it really? Whew. Really? Okay. So once again, new kid on the block, right? New kid on the block. My favorite Anissa Wardy story, and I know, as I said to Mary, this is my version of it, so you can correct me later. This happened, when she was first, probably in the 90s, and she was teaching a film called The Piano. And you may know this New Zealand movie, and it's dark, right? And it's about an oppressed young woman, and in this movie, the woman has her finger chopped off, you may recall. And this is very traumatic. And Anissa was teaching this film, and she invited me to come to her class because, as we do at Chatham, senior faculty have to sit in and evaluate junior faculty, write up comments for the promotion and tenure committee, blah, 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 blah. And I take this very seriously, as did she. She probably took it more seriously than I did. So I went to her class, and I'm sitting in the back of the room, and it's wonderful, right? And she's going on and making all these points about hierarchy and hegemony and the difficulty of these women and the way the film itself, blah, blah, blah. And then she says, and then the finger. And she holds up her hand like this. You're the audience, right? You're the class, and I'm sitting where David Feingold is. And she said, and then her finger, she loses her finger. And I look up, and I think, something's wrong here. Oh, I see what's wrong. And so I raised my hand like hers, and I said, right? And she's looking at me, and I said, right? turn your hand so it looks like the finger was chopped off. They can see your finger here like this, right? There's no point in doing it this way. Turn your hand. And she looks at me and says, hold on a second. Dr. Lenz, what are you trying to signal me? And I said, turn your hand so that they can't see your finger. And she said, aha, that's what senior faculty are for. Perfect, right? Totally perfect. All right, I could go on and on, but I'll embarrass her because she's here. Who else has an Anissa Wardy story that they would like to tell? Here, right here. Hi, Emma.
I'm Emma Hooper, class of 2009. I came to Chatham undecided, and I was kind of interested in psychology, and I did end up becoming a psychology major. But one of the first classes I took was Representations of Race and Gender, because I just thought the title sounded interesting, and it was a class with Dr. Wardy. And I remember her saying, I'm gonna ruin movies for you. I'm gonna make it so you just can't watch movies the same way anymore. And I was like, I don't know, like, I'm not buying it, like, that doesn't seem to make any sense. And we watched, I remember one of the movies we watched was Pretty Woman, and 100%, I cannot watch movies the same way, but the way that I can watch movies now is so much better than the way that I watched movies before. And it just, and then I ended up double majoring in cultural studies and psychology. So that got me into all the really cool, like, gender and film classes that I could take, and it was that first class. And you and Dr. Lenz are the reason that I can write. I was a terrible writer when I came to Chatham, and all your feedback and the grading that you did was worth it. I can write now. So thank you so much.
Anybody else want to do a Dr. Wardy? Okay, we promised this would not be a roast, right? We promised that. Joe McNeil. Oh, I see Joe McNeil is also here today. It's always nice to have the people that you're going to talk about here. So Joe McNeil is known for many things. Since we were talking tutorials a while ago, sunflower tutorials. Anybody do a sunflower tutorial with Dr. McNeil? No. Okay, well, there goes that line down the drain. We'll move on. Also known for being a star of the student-faculty softball game. Anybody play against Dr. McNeil? Whoa, batting 0 for 2. 0 for 2.
Strike out.
Okay. Thank you, that counts. I feel redeemed. Thank you. All right, I'll go a different direction. So when we first started the Scholars Program back in 2004, Dr. McNeil graciously offered to be my partner. And he and I, over the course of about 3.5 weeks in the summer before fall, created 2 brand new courses that we taught as part of that initial cohort of scholars. I can't imagine a better colleague, someone I would rather have worked with than Joe McNeil. For 10 years, he and I worked together, supported each other, helped each other, made each other feel better when we needed it, if you know what I mean, for student problems, and did crazy things together, like go out to dinner with 20 students at Aladdin's, and then get in cars or vans and drive down to the Warhol Museum and run amok in the Warhol for 1.5 hours to 2 hours, and then try to bring everybody back, which was a challenge. It is like herding cats, right? Getting all the students back in the vans or cars or whatever transportation we had and getting back on campus. Dr. McNeil was always willing to go over and above whatever I asked of him, the institution asked of him, and the students asked of him. He even at one point, I hope this is not speaking out of turn, brought his fiancée to dinner at Aladdin's with us, which I thought was way over and beyond any opportunity, right? And mixed beautifully, fit in perfectly. So I think he knew he had a keeper, and certainly I enjoyed working with Dr. McNeil. Dr. McNeil stories, even though he's here. One down here. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Dade Humphreys. I'm class of 2009 and 11.
English. Took a break. But Dr. McNeil, we didn't actually have any classes together, but we did go to Belgium for study abroad. And I had just started, this doesn't even relate to anything really at all, but kind of a side note in my personal life. I was just starting to get into running at the time, and I ran a 10K for the first time, and it was a bad time. It was like an hour, 15, 20 minutes. And I told you about it because you were a runner at the time. And you said, well, who cares? You did it. And I was like, absolutely. I did do that. That's pretty cool. So now I run marathons slowly, but I do it. So pretty cool. And I always think about that. Anyways, that's that.
Who was it who said it's the little occasional moment, right, that makes a huge difference? And I think that's true. I think both Tom and I feel this, that anytime you walk on campus, anytime you're in your office, anytime you're getting a coffee, there's an opportunity to connect with a student. And I think that's really important. That's something that we value and that we see here every day that we were teachers, right? Uh-oh. Uh-oh. All right. That's Joe Wister on the right. I have no idea who it is on the left. So Joe Wister also is here, which is amusing. I could tell so many stories, Joe Wister stories, but I'm not going to do that. I know. The veil will not be rent, right? But I will tell one story. One of the things that Joe and I liked to do was travel abroad together. One of the best, I can't imagine, right? A better partner to travel abroad than Joe Wister. We went to the Galapagos, we went to Belize and Guatemala 10 times, right? I mean, we did a lot of travel together. And we got to sort of understand each other and discover, you know, who had this anxiety, who had that fear, who was like this, who was like that. And after all, the trips we went on, we referred to as the Heart of Darkness trips, right? Because every day someone would say, oh, we're going into a cave that's 1.5 miles deep for an hour and a half. I'm terrified of caves. Oh, we're going to swim with sharks off the reef. I'm terrified of sharks. Oh my God, spiders at night in the cave? All right, so anyway, my favorite story of travel abroad is really about us. I'm sorry, students, but you were there, but this is really about us. We were in Belize, we were on Southwater Key, and one of the things we like to do is not only snorkel, but we also, especially if we had a group that was fairly adventurous, we would offer to do a night snorkel, which meant that you had to have underwater flashlights. You would get together at the beach where one light would be your marker to make sure you were swimming back to shore and not out to sea. And as the sun fell and it became dark, you would step out over the seagrass, get down and start snorkeling out to the reef. It was unbelievable, right? Absolutely unbelievable, the things that we saw. So one night we're doing this, and we had about 5 students with us who are willing to do this crazy thing. And he and I are at the front of the group with our guide, Furman. And we have our lights, and we get into the water, and we get down on our knees, and we start going out. And suddenly, Dr. Wister grabs my fin, and he shakes his light at me, right? His light is not working anymore, right? So much for that Costco light. Did not work. You need something a little more depth certified. So he said, you know, we're snorkeling, right? So, suggested to me that we would go together and use my light. And I said, fine. So we start going out, and we're going out, and suddenly in front of us, right here, appears this octopus, big octopus with all these tentacles going like this, right? And I've got the light, and he's right behind me, right? And I've got the light, and I'm like pulling back a little, and suddenly he grabs my wrist with the light and pushes it up so he can see the strokes. Suddenly we both realized we could get up on our knees. We were in water that was this deep. But a terrifying moment. to feel my hand gripped by the iron vice of Dr. Wister's hand being drawn toward this horrible creature. It was amazing. I loved the moment. I love telling the story. Who else has a Dr. Wister story? Would like to tell a Dr. Wister story? Aha.
My name's Sheila McElroy, class of 92. I just think of the dignity with which he treated students, including me. As a 20-year-old, drinking wine. In the Galapagos, it was allowed. Talking at tutorial, he was my tutorial advisor about cognitive dissonance. I'm sure I sounded like a total twit. 10 years later, as a 30-year-old, graduate school, getting my master's in counseling, I remember for a class, wanted to curb my behavior of being late to everything, and he actually took that seriously, even though I was probably still late to everything. Just treated me with dignity. And then just again now, I'm almost 50, and just had a conversation. He remembers things about me. I remember things about him, and the dignity with which he moves through life. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Stephanie Barkin, Fitzsimmons again. My story is actually from Belize and Guatemala. We were at the Southwater Keys, but these two professors, when you're traveling abroad with them, they really, they're up for anything. And while we were at Southwater Keys, there is actually karaoke. And I think my favorite moment is they finally agreed to do one song with us. And Dr. Lenz Wister and a group of us are standing up, and we had picked the time warp. And in the middle of the time warp, we all got up and we started to do the dance moves to the time warp, and we get to the line, and Dr. Wister goes, "I forgot about the hips. Turn off the cameras. There's no hips." Because the pelvic thrust did not happen that day. But I wanted to just say thank you for that memory and many, many more.
I actually ran into him last night at the gala, and I told him, I'm like, you probably do not remember this story, but I was going home for some break, and I was taking the Greyhound bus home to Philadelphia, and I asked him, I was like, hey, what bus do you take downtown to go to the Greyhound station? And he goes, what? You're going there by yourself? I go, yeah, And he goes, that's behind the prison. And I was like, oh, yeah. And he's like, do you have any more finals today? I'm like, I have one more, and then I'm going to go. He goes, meet me here at 12:30. And then he drove me to the Groundhand station, so I did not die. I came home, and I was like, how was the bus? I'm like, oh, I'm a professor. He drove me to the station, and my parents were very thankful for you. So thanks.
I think we're out of time. Is that what I'm hearing, Dana?
It's 11, but do you want to go through the next slides quickly?
Linda Rosenzweig. Anybody have Linda Rosenzweig? Yes? Do you have a story?
Not so much. I mean, she was education.
Right.
Sorry. So, Ginny Lundy, class of '84. I started off interested in education, and she was one of my professors for that. And a lot of what I remember from the education department was the field placements, having to go out into the schools. And I discovered through that I did not want to be a teacher. It was not for me.
Good to know now.
It was, and that's it. And that's what I appreciated about her and the program, was that it got me out there right away. And so the negative, as it were, became a positive. And I got a lot out of it. I enjoyed it, but knew this was not for me. And she was great with that. What am I doing now? I'm actually associate registrar at a college north of Boston. So I discovered that I like higher ed. Still don't want to teach, but I like higher ed, administrative stuff. But middle school and high school was no. That's a no.
All right, we're going to run through these. Oh, Barbara Palmer. I see one right there. Bonnie.
I'm Bonnie Dat McDonald, class of 93. Dr. Palmer interviewed me for the scholarship. So I came as a high school student, interviewed with her. I remember talking with her about theater and Shakespeare, and I was just entranced by her like the moment I met her. And couldn't wait to take classes with her. I had to do Shakespeare, and I could not do Shakespeare with her because she did a sabbatical the year I was going to take it. And so I did Chaucer with her. And Chaucer was like, it was like 4 of us in like a study carrel in the library, and you know, just immersing ourselves in Chaucer. And everybody who knows me knows that I was hit by a car my junior year. It was during my Chaucer class, so I had to make up the rest of Chaucer. But when I worked in admissions as an admissions ambassador, they let us read through our files, and I read my.
That sounds like a violation of so
It
many
does.
rules.
It does. I was
I
just
mean,
thinking about
really.
this yesterday, and I was like, should they have let us do that? But anyway,
No.
Dr. Palmer, when she wrote about our interview that we had when I was a senior in high school, she wrote, it was a really, really great thing, but she said, she lacks polish, but that's the Butler in her. I'm from Butler. And I think that a lot, because I think
That is Dr. Palmer.
I still lack polish. I think, and maybe that's the Butler in me. But I just learned so much from her, and she was just like that person that I still tell people about it. Like, you know, when you learn about Shakespeare, even though I didn't take her class, she would still tell us stuff in other classes about Shakespeare. She was there doing the original research. She's like, oh yeah, I know the annotations say this means this, but it was really more like this. And just like opened my eyes to like what that book said that things meant in Shakespearean times might not have been correct. She was amazing. She was amazing.
Thank you. Mary, we've already done. Janet. I'm getting the signal we need to run through these. I'm sorry. Knudsen. Yes? Debbie Rubin. Nice look, right? Lynn Curtis. Heather McNair. Ann Williamson. Nicole Bayless. Kristen Schaefer. Hallie Resnick. I think the newest hire. Okay. So we don't have time for Q&A because we're supposed to go have brunch, right? So we're all going to move over to brunch, which is in the Welker room. And as I would say, as long as you've paid, you can come, but I don't know how that works. Maybe it just, if you come, you'll be fine. I'm not checking. I want to thank you, right? We want to thank you for coming today. I know there are many other things you'd rather be doing, drinking Bloody Marys or something. And this has been a lot of fun for us. Obviously, the reason we do this is you, right? I'm not going to get all choked up about this. I'm going to leave it at that. You want to say anything? No, I'm good. Okay. Thank you. So good to see you all.